Thanks for coming to this webinar. We do these about once a month or so, and they've been a lot of fun, really interesting, lots of good questions. So the background on this one is this this article. There was an article that I wrote about 2 years ago um, that was reflecting on some experience I had as an agile coach in a large organization. So I wrote this almost exactly 2 years ago in June of 2019, and we got some good response at the time. There were folks that had similar experiences, and kind of like tucked it away in the back of my mind, didn't really think about it. And sometimes we like to reshare articles that are interesting from the past. And I reshared this article again more recently, and this time it got a really big response. A lot of people seem really interested in the topic, and so um, we decided to have a little webinar Q&A session here to talk about some of the issues with leadership and agile transformations, and the really the use of consultants in that process. But I think it's probably true even if you have coaches in house that are doing this work. So really, to get straight into it, I'm going to give a kind of a quick overview of the main kind of points of the article, and then we will take some questions, and I'll do my best to try to answer them here in the webinar. And then if you want to talk further, I'm always available to book a call, and we can have a conversation about your particular situation. So just to dive into it, usually when I talk to managers or senior leaders around why they're interested in agile at all, it usually has something to do with speed. And so I think the folks that are typically um, leading the charge around agile would be somewhere in the upper middle layer of management, right? You're sort of your director, VP level in product or in IT or engineering, and they want speed because usually they're being crushed between the upper and lower layers of the organization, right? So there is a senior leadership level that is responsible for vision and strategy, and the folks in the trenches that do the work are typically responsible for execution. And in many organizations, there isn't really healthy connective tissue between that top and bottom layer of strategy and execution, and it is middle management's job to be that connective tissue. And they see agile as a way to get their teams to deliver faster because they're under a lot of pressure from above, right? So it in a lot of ways it's seen as a lifeline to deal with the pressures of managing these teams. Unfortunately, a lot of these middle managers inadvertently end up being more of a barrier than an information conduit, right? Or a supporting and enabling layer as they should be. And we're going to talk a little bit in a few minutes about why that is. But I just wanted to set up this context. So, as a coach or as a consultant, if you're in an environment where you're trying to help teams adopt agile practices, this is probably familiar. Not everybody in the organization is totally up to speed on why they're really doing this and what it's about, right? And so an effect of that is you end up with a lot of what I like to call weaponized agile consulting, right? So, agile for some of the senior leadership is seen as a blunt instrument that they can use in their relentless game of thrones with their colleagues, right? So, the thing about consultants is that the reason consultants exist is because there is sometimes a need for specialized knowledge or expertise that an organization might not want to have a full-time person for that. but that they may need some outside perspective, right? So, the consulting world is full of questionable practices and lots of smoke and mirrors in some regard. But consulting as a thing is neither bad nor good. It's all about how you do it. And I think all too often organizations will use consultants as a way to distract from the real problems in the organization, right? And so we're seen a little bit as expendable, right? So they'll we can say things that executives have a hard time. Maybe it's a little impolite for them to be as direct as we can. So they'll bring us in perhaps to say a bunch of stuff. This was certainly true in my case, that they themselves wouldn't want to be seen saying in a meeting, right, in front of their peers. You're doing it wrong. Here, there's a better way. Someone might have invested a lot of their time and energy in setting something up that isn't really working. And so it can be impolitic for an exec to give feedback to their peers. So, oh no, look, I brought in the third party consultants who can show a report proving that I was right. So that's us being used as a battering ram in a political power struggle. And it happens all the time. So if you are a coach, or if you're in an organization and you're working with consultants, I think one of the things to look out for is, are those consultants being used as a bludgeon, or are they actually contributing real value to a discussion around continuous improvement and growth in the organization, right? And another sort of anti-pattern that I talked about in the article you want to look out for is the idea of implementing Agile as if it were a sort of fixed structure or fixed set of processes that you set up, you train everybody, and you set it and forget it, right? And so a lot of the confusion and agony around Agile and agility in large modern enterprises is that there, to the uninitiated, it just seems like you follow this diagram. We've got all these people who get trained in these particular specialties, who get certified and this or that, and then you go and you implement this process. And the reason that doesn't work is because Agile isn't a process. It's really a mindset. And it's a mindset that has roots in the continuous improvement movement that has been underway for about 100 years. And it directly descends from lean thinking, all the way back to, before Toyota to Deming and others, around how to think about process improvement flexibly and how to work together collaboratively to make the organization better, right? And so, yes, there are some practices in digital, in software in particular, that are known to work, and they're repeatable patterns that we can employ. But setting up Agile is not just implementing the process. And so when you see that happening, it's good to call it out and or run the other way, depending on your particular situation. And the reason I think at the root of all of this is that Agile introduced a lean thinking approach to software development, extended work that had been done for many decades around flow, around worker autonomy and empowerment, around collaboration and cross-functional teams. It brought it into software development, but that's not how people think in most management circles, right? And so management is still standing very solidly in the Frederick Winslow Taylor world. Even today, even in the 2020s, there are still organizations where the management philosophy is what Taylor taught us over 100 years ago, right? So looking at Taylor just for a second, Taylor was solving a real problem at the time. He was trying to bring standardization into modern industry. And that required, and he's really focused on process, right? And that required separating the thinking from the doing, right? So all of the thinking, the planning around a process was done by clerks up in a room with chalkboards and graph paper and things like that. And they figured out the perfect process, and then they would go and have workers on the line implement that process. And it worked really well for producing a lot of stuff really quickly. But separating the thinking from the doing no longer works in our industry. This is old thinking, and yet a lot of management organically, because it really embraced Taylor at the turn of the century and through all the way through World War II. It's never really gone away. So the more leading edge management philosophies and cultures that have embraced things like servant leadership and other notions of bringing the thinking and doing back together and having more autonomy and more delegation, they're moving in the right direction. But that ghost of Taylor is still really, really strong in the organization, and so that runs right up against agile work and agile thinking. So what we believe at Startup Patterns is really critical is a kind of mindful agile leadership, right? And so if you're going to be doing agile, if you're going to be helping teams that are delivering products to customers do it in an agile way, you really need to be focusing on these three key principles, I'd say. First and foremost, which is respecting people, right? That comes right out of the lean philosophy, the Toyota production system. Respecting people is really important, and we can do that by encouraging growth and encouraging autonomy and creativity on our teams, which means you have to, as a leader, you have to release some degree of control, right? So that's very much the opposite of what Taylor taught us. Secondly, we need to continuously improve by encouraging fast feedback and data-driven decisions. So that means moving the decision-making to where the information is, as David Marquet says sometimes. And then thirdly, one twist that I think we at Startup Patterns have added to this, these two are very common pillars. These are basically the first two bullets of the pillars of Toyota way. But what I think we've added to it is a sense of self-awareness, that it's really important for leaders to also themselves be going through a kind of transformation in how they lead and how they see the organization, because you're not going to be able to lead an organization through an agility attempt without yourself really reflecting and growing on how you lead your organization, how you make decisions, whether you talk more, whether you ask more questions, whether you delegate effectively or micromanage. All of that stuff is really critical in creating that connective tissue between the folks on the ground that are really trying to do agile software development every day and have their hands dirty, and the sort of lofty heights of vision and strategy in the C-suite. And that requires being more of a supportive player, more of an information conduit, and less of a barrier to the flow of information around the organization. So we'd love to see if folks had any questions. There are a few that I have been answering since reposting that article, some that came up in the discussion thread on LinkedIn. Others folks have reached out to me directly, and so I'll answer a couple of those. And while I'm doing that, if you have further questions around this stuff, please post it in the chat, and Alyssa will help field those questions to me so that I can try and answer them. And if we don't have time to get to your question, I want to really encourage you to book some time with us. If you go to startuppatterns.com and click on our contact page, there is an embedded link to my calendar right there on the page. And you can book an hour with me, and we can talk in detail about your situation, and I will try and help you in whatever way I can. Right? So firstly, we've got a couple questions here queued up already. And let me give you the first one. A lot of times folks are asking, what is the difference between agile and agility, um, or something, some question kind of like that. And I think it's really important. This one I'm actually rather passionate about as someone who has been involved in the agile movement, uh, for lack of a better term, since pretty early on in the 2000s. So it's been a long time. I've been in the community for a long time, and I've seen it adapt and change. And so the first thing I would point out is that I have it written here: agile with a capital A, um, and agility with a lowercase a, because agile with a capital A does refer to uh, a real thing, a set of a community, first of all, of folks who are aligned on a lot of values about how to work and how to make work better and how to do software development properly. So there is a community and a body of knowledge that has a name and has an identity, and there are, real practices that are a real thing. So I think sometimes when people get into discussions online about this, and I see a lot of people saying, well, it's more important to just use agility. Agility is certainly important. The idea that, you generally want to be flexible enough that you can change direction gracefully at speed, which is basically what agility means. When you think of a cheetah or a sports car, yes, that is important. But I think it would be unhelpful to abandon the concept of agile proper. That there are people before you who have worked on stuff and have figured out practices that work for given situations. And so, agile is a real community and a body of knowledge, and it's not monolithic, right? So we in the agile community don't all agree. That's part of what makes it grow, makes it great. Some of us are really comfortable with certain ways of working that are very fast and informal and flexible, and aren't particularly tied to one methodology, Scrum or Kanban or SAFe. I tend to be more on that side of the continuum. There are others who are very process focused and believe that we need to meet enterprise needs by being more structured and more formal and having more um, official governance bodies and certifications. And there's a place for those people in the community as well. What's important is that we're all having an open and honest dialogue about all the things we're doing and what's working and what's not. So for me, that's really the most important difference between agile and agility. Just one more question I've got queued up here, and then we'll see if there are any questions in the chat. Another one that I get, this is more of a statement and an asking for advice rather than a question, but we hear a lot, our organization tried agile and it didn't work. So I would say probably about 50% of the time when I start talking to people, looking at the possibility of coming to help them as a consultant, I'll ask, well, what's happened before? And usually, Agile is very popular now. It's been around for a while. People will say, yeah, we tried this a couple of years ago and it didn't go very well. Or, there was a lot of pushback, or, it failed. And so I will usually try and peel back the layers of how that went and try to find out what went wrong. And it's tricky because I embrace the idea of agile. I embrace it as a word and as a signifier of a community of practice that has a lot of really great experience and something to share. And when things give agile a bad name, it bugs me and it makes my job harder. So I try to unpack like what really happened there. And usually, it's a couple of key things. One is it's typically done in a very top-down way. So the leadership will come out and say, we've decided that as an organization, we are now going to be agile. You will all be sent to training to learn how to do it, and then you will do it. Good luck, congratulations. And so that messaging is coming from the top as a command rather than something that the teams themselves are interested in, are curious about, have particular pain points that they think Agile can solve, and are pulling it, or doing their own research and trying different things before it's even officially approved. So that's one of the biggest problems, is when it's a top-down command from above, it tends to not really stick because there isn't buy-in. It's really the wrong way to do it. Another thing that really tends to go wrong is when, as I mentioned in one of the slides earlier, it's rolled out as a very structured process. And so if the agile flavor that you're trying in your organization has a lot of focus on role definition, retraining people, changing their titles, making sure people have the right role and are in the right position, and that all the particular meetings and rituals are set up properly, and there's a lot of review and discussion, and it's all kind of being rolled out like a big campaign, it's probably not going to work. It's probably going to rattle people. It'll probably create a lot of fear and anxiety. It'll probably create a lot of conflict. And so often when I talk to people about, hey, we tried it and it didn't work, they did it that way. And what I would do instead is I would focus on the first principles of Agile, really, thinking about flow and autonomy and flexibility, value, really looking at our process at a very high level with first principles, and then examining what are some of the Agile practices that are available to us, more like a menu, and we can try different practices and see how they work, and essentially build our own custom version of Agile by trying things and being honest with ourselves about what's working and what's not, and grow our way towards an organic Agile process. And that will stick, and it will have buy-in, and it will be homegrown and tend to change mindsets across the organization. So those are two kind of key comments or questions we got in response to the article. Alyssa, were there any other questions that came up?
Yeah, we had one question from Brent. What's your take on the process is championed when the outcome is good, and the process is blamed when the outcome is bad? I feel like we've seen this one come up a bunch, Sam.
Yeah, that's a really good one. Yeah, I think that, so if I could kind of reflect on the question first, that when things go well or poorly in an organization, usually people are looking for somewhere to place blame. That actually, I think, is the first place to focus on, right? I would ask, why do we have a culture where blame is part of it, right? Like that's got to come from somewhere. Typically, the culture originates from the founders / senior leadership and trickles its way down, affecting how everyone else behaves and makes decisions. And so if there's a culture of blame at all, we're already starting on the wrong foot, right? Because look, change is hard. We're going to have problems. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to have bugs. We're going to miss deadlines. Like, that stuff's going to happen. There are going to be disagreements and conflicts. If the leadership is not prepared to navigate that territory of high stress, emotional challenges in a way that's psychologically safe and open, we're wasting our time even talking about Agile, because that leadership problem needs to be dealt with first. So I think if there's even a question of blame, there are going to be problems that's going to ripple through everything else. If you can approach it instead as, this is a scientific experiment. We're going to try some things, and they're not all going to work. And what we agree is that we're all doing it together, and that we respect each other, and we're going to be empathetic about everyone's particular experience in trying this new thing. Maybe it works really well for engineering, but but QA hates it. Well, do we just bulldoze QA anyway and make them do it? Or do we have a culture of talking about, well, why isn't it working for you? Let's look at how we can make it better for everyone, right? And so for me, I think that's really where the root of the question comes from is what kind of culture do we have in our organization? Is it one of growth mindset and experimentation, or is it one of fear of failure and and that just really shuts down creative thinking? So that's my take on it. Okay, so if there aren't any other questions, I'll just leave you with this. We do this stuff all the time. We're working with a lot of great organizations, all of them progressing in their own way. Every organization is different. Every individual is different. And we would be really happy to help you with your mindful agile leadership. And we have a lot of things to offer on that. So like I said earlier in the question section, if you have more questions, we're happy to answer them. If we do run out of time, please do feel free to go to our website and click on the contact link and book some time, and we can get on a call and we can talk through what you're struggling with.